Scotland, 1850. The wavering glow of a brass lantern played across the brocade wallpaper in the Aldwyn family's drawing room, its light bending into restless shadows that crawled along the walls like living things. The fire had burned low, giving little warmth, and the storm beyond rattled the tall windows, filling the chamber with a melancholy rhythm. At the pane stood Lady Seraphina Aldwyn, her fingertips sketching faint circles upon the chilled glass. Rain streaked downward in trembling rivulets, each drop falling as though the heavens themselves wept with her. "It is resolved, then." The words escaped her lips in the barest whisper, soft enough to vanish beneath the storm, yet weighty enough to seal her fate. Behind her, the sound of a deliberate cough broke the silence. Lord Reginald Aldwyn, tall and imposing even in his advancing years, adjusted his stance near the hearth. His tone was clipped, carrying the gravity of finality. "The contract was signed this morning, Seraphina. By the end of this month, you shall become the Princess of Durnmere." Seraphina's hand stilled upon the window. She closed her eyes against the ache swelling in her chest, willing herself not to fracture like the ivory figurines displayed on the mantel, fragile relics of beauty meant only for display. The name her father uttered pressed upon her with suffocating force, Prince Alaric Draemont. It was not a name that stirred her heart with excitement or girlish fancy, but one that coiled around her spirit with foreboding. "Father, surely another way exists," she murmured, her green eyes shining with desperation as she turned to face him. Her mother, Lady Isolde Aldwyn, interjected before her father could reply. "The rumors that circle about him are just that, idle whispers." Though her voice attempted steadiness, there was a tremor beneath her words. Seated upon the settee with posture sculpted to perfection, she smoothed invisible wrinkles from the pale silk of her gown. "The proposal is remarkably generous. To join our name with that of Durnmere will elevate the Aldwyn standing beyond measure." "At what cost?" Seraphina pressed, her voice breaking with quiet urgency. Lord Aldwyn's gaze sharpened, his countenance hardening into the familiar mask of a man driven by ambition. "The prince requested your hand in particular, Seraphina. No other young woman of society has stirred his interest. It is a rare honor, one you should receive with pride." "Pride?" Seraphina's voice rose despite herself. "They say he never departs Durnmere keep save on nights so dark that even the moon hides its face. They say his servants vanish without trace. They say—" "Enough." The snap of Lady Isolde's fan broke the air like a whip. "Such scandalous talk is unworthy of you. The prince may be unconventional, but his heritage is unimpeachable, his fortune immense. We shall want for nothing." "Not even my happiness," Seraphina whispered, her words slipping like a wound unbound. Silence fell so heavy it seemed the very walls held their breath. For a fleeting moment, Lord Aldwyn's stern expression softened. "My child, joy in marriage is a luxury few possess, even among the nobility. What sustains a union is security, respect, and position. Those are the true cornerstones of a lasting life." At the far end of the room, Clarice Bennet, Seraphina's devoted maid, stood arranging a vase of lilies. Though she pretended to be absorbed in her work, her dark eyes betrayed a flash of sympathy when they met Seraphina's. "When shall I meet him?" Seraphina asked at last, her voice tight with resignation. "You shall not," Lady Aldwyn answered coolly, the words precise and unyielding. "The prince was explicit. The wedding will take place at Durnmere Keep, and you shall behold your husband only at the altar." Seraphina's breath caught, her body trembling with horror. "That is barbaric. To be wed to a man whose face I scarcely know." "You have seen him," Lord Aldwyn interjected. "At Lady Catherford's masquerade, 2 seasons past. He watched you closely from the shadows." The memory struck her like a ghostly hand, a tall, commanding figure veiled half in darkness, his presence so powerful it silenced the revelry around him. She had felt his gaze then, heavy, assessing, yet she had dismissed it as a flight of youthful imagination. "That was him," she whispered in disbelief. "The prince does not follow the petty conventions of society," Lord Aldwyn said, his tone edged with dry disdain. "But he found you memorable enough to make inquiries." A sharp knock broke the tension. The butler, Simeon, entered, carrying a polished silver tray upon which rested a parcel wrapped in midnight blue velvet. "A delivery for Miss Aldwyn, my lord," he intoned. "From Durnmere Keep." All eyes fixed upon the package as Simeon set it gently before Seraphina. Her fingers, pale and trembling, untied the folds to reveal a small wooden box, its craftsmanship exquisite. When she lifted the lid, a collective gasp escaped the room. Nestled within lay a ring unlike any she had seen. Not a diamond, but a sapphire of breathtaking depth, encircled by diamonds that shimmered like captured stars. Beneath it, folded neatly, was a parchment sealed with crimson wax and impressed with the crest of Durnmere. "Read it," Lady Aldwyn urged, her curiosity overcoming formality. Seraphina broke the seal. The handwriting within was bold, angular, unmistakably the hand of a man accustomed to command. "Lady Seraphina, I present this sapphire as the emblem of our union. It has adorned the hand of every princess of Durnmere since the reign of Queen Aldwyn. Tradition dictates I should place it upon your hand myself, yet circumstances deny me that privilege. Though this arrangement may appear sudden, it was not made without deliberation. I have observed you, and I believe you carry the strength Durnmere has long been without. I shall await you at the altar upon the appointed day. Alaric Draemont, Prince of Durnmere. No words of affection, no sentiment, no trace of warmth, only unadorned certainty, cool and commanding." Seraphina felt her world closing about her, a gilded cage lined in velvet and stone. "How practical," Lady Aldwyn remarked, though disappointment clouded her tone. Lord Aldwyn inclined his head in approval. "A man of action, not hollow words. That speaks well of his ability to govern estates." Seraphina said nothing. But across the chamber, her eyes met Clarice's, and in that silent exchange lay the unspoken truth. She was alone in her fear, save for the one soul who cared for her happiness above all else. Lord Reginald Aldwyn leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly upon his knee, the firelight casting deep grooves across his weathered face. "Before I consented to this match, I made inquiries of my own," he said, his voice softened by the weight of paternal duty. "His tenants speak of him as a fair master, one who never raises rents beyond reason. His business partners describe him as honorable, if intensely private, and his solicitor, who drew the terms of the marriage settlement, assured me that the prince had been most generous in the provisions set aside for you." "Then why," Seraphina asked, her voice trembling, "does society whisper of him with such dread?" "Because, child, people fear what they cannot fathom, and the prince has made himself deliberately unknowable." Lord Aldwyn paused, unease flickering across his expression. There was, it is true, a tragedy in his past, an event that altered him profoundly. But that does not make him cruel. Seraphina studied her father's face, her heart clawing for reassurance. "You truly believe I shall be safe with him?" "I would never send my daughter to a man I believed capable of harm," he replied, unexpected emotion roughening his usually measured tone. "This union may not be the romance you dreamt of, but it offers stability. And perhaps, in time, a measure of contentment." It was the closest thing to apology he would ever offer. Seraphina inclined her head, her throat tight. "Then I shall endeavor to be a fitting princess." Her father reached across the space between them, his hand resting awkwardly upon hers, a rare, almost startling show of affection. "You have always exceeded expectation, my dear. I have no doubt you will do so again." 2 days later, the carriage bore Seraphina away from the familiar fields of her childhood. The journey to Durnmere Keep seemed unending, the horses' hooves pounding out a rhythm of inevitability upon the sodden earth. Through the rain-blurred glass, she watched the countryside give way to vast, wind-swept moors, desolate and stark beneath a sky blackened by storm. The further they went, the more the landscape seemed to conspire with her dread. Opposite her, Clarice Bennet sat quietly, her presence a small comfort. Neither spoke much, for words seemed too fragile against the weight of what awaited. At last, the carriage turned down a long, tree-lined drive, its gravel path vanishing into the distance. At its end loomed Durnmere Keep, a vast Gothic edifice of dark stone and soaring spires that clawed at the iron-gray heavens. Its silhouette was one of both majesty and menace, and Seraphina felt her pulse quicken as thunder rumbled in the distance. "Give him a chance to be more than his reputation," Clarice whispered, as the carriage slowed before doors of ancient oak. A row of servants awaited, their faces schooled into impassive masks. At their head stood a severe woman clad in black silk. She curtsied with impeccable precision. "Lady Seraphina," she intoned, "I am Mrs. Eleanor Winters, housekeeper of Durnmere Keep. Welcome to your new home." Seraphina descended from the carriage, her skirts brushing the wet stone. For an instant she caught sight of a tall shadow at an upper window, broad-shouldered, motionless, watching. A blink later, it was gone, leaving her to wonder if her imagination had conjured it. "His Highness awaits your arrival," Mrs. Winters continued, her expression unreadable. "The ceremony shall take place tomorrow, in the family chapel at noon." Summoning every ounce of composure, Seraphina followed her into the cavernous hall. Suits of armor gleamed dimly in alcoves, while rows of ancestral portraits loomed above, their painted eyes seeming to judge her trespass. Each step echoed like a tolling bell, carrying her closer to her fate, the mysterious prince who had claimed her from afar. Tomorrow, she would be his bride. Tomorrow, she would meet the man whose very name unsettled the parlors of Edinburgh and London alike. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning of her wedding dawned shrouded in mist, as though the sky itself recoiled from the vows to come. Seraphina stood motionless, while Mrs. Winters and two silent maids dressed her in a gown that had arrived unbidden in her chambers during the night. It was a creation of ivory silk and lace, the fit so precise it seemed conjured by sorcery rather than needle and thread. "His Highness has an eye for detail," Mrs. Winters observed, as Seraphina's astonishment betrayed her. It was the only scrap of personal knowledge anyone had offered about the prince since her arrival. "Has he arranged everything for this day?" Seraphina asked, fighting to steady her voice. "The prince oversees all matters at Durnmere," Mrs. Winters replied with an inscrutable half-bow. When at last the gossamer veil was lowered over her face, Seraphina caught her reflection in the ornate mirror. Pale, spectral, a bride fashioned more for sacrifice than for celebration. "It is time," Mrs. Winters announced precisely at the 11th hour. The walk to the chapel was long, a pilgrimage down endless corridors hung with ancient tapestries of battles and hunts. Seraphina focused on each measured breath, each careful step, refusing to let her mind fix upon the figure waiting at her journey's end. The chapel doors opened with a slow groan that echoed like lamentation. Hundreds of candles bathed the vaulted chamber in golden light, softening the severity of stone walls and scattering colors through the stained-glass saints above. The air was thick with the perfume of white roses and lilies, cloying and almost oppressive. A small gathering awaited, her parents proud yet anxious, household staff lined discreetly along the walls, the kindly vicar, whose eyes carried unspoken pity. And at the altar, his back to her, stood the man who was now her fate. Prince Alaric Draemont turned as the first chords of music swelled. Through her veil, Seraphina saw only the outline, tall, broad, posture straight as a soldier's. As she drew nearer, detail sharpened, raven-black hair, features chiseled with aristocratic severity, and then his eyes. Heaven help her, his eyes. Blue as winter ice, piercing through veil and flesh alike, striking straight into her soul. He was handsome, yes, but with a harsh, unyielding beauty, nothing like the powdered society beaux who pranced in ballrooms. His was a handsomeness of strength, of something primal and untamed. A thin scar bisected his brow, marring and yet lending gravity to a face otherwise sculpted in perfection. His expression betrayed nothing as she came to stand beside him. The ceremony unfurled like a dream in which she was only half present. She heard herself speak vows, felt the weight of a new ring sliding onto her hand beside the sapphire's cold brilliance. The prince's voice was deep, measured, utterly devoid of sentiment, yet carrying an authority that brooked no resistance. And then the moment. At the vicar's command, he lifted her veil. Slowly, deliberately, as though unveiling some priceless relic, his hands drew away the gossamer barrier. Their eyes met, unfiltered. For the briefest instant, something flickered in his gaze, not cruelty, not coldness, but a glimmer of uncertainty, quickly extinguished. The kiss was brief, formal, the barest brush of lips. Yet to Seraphina, it carried an unexpected warmth, a spark of life against the ice encasing her limbs. Moments later, she walked back down the aisle, the Princess of Durnmere, her hand resting lightly upon the arm of a man who was both stranger and husband, bound to her now in the eyes of God and crown. The wedding breakfast was held in the vast dining hall, its vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of triumph long past. The table gleamed with silver and crystal, but the atmosphere was brittle with unease. Prince Alaric presided at the head, Seraphina seated dutifully at his right. Their parents filled the silence with anxious chatter, commenting on the weather, the road, the beauty of Durnmere Keep, anything to avoid the palpable tension at its heart. "Your gardens appear most extensive, Your Highness," Lady Isolde ventured at last, straining for polite conversation. "They are," the prince replied, his tone curt. Lord Reginald cleared his throat. "And I am told the Durnmere Library is among the finest in Scotland." At this, the prince's features softened slightly. "It has been the work of generations. My grandfather in particular was devoted to its growth." Seraphina seized the moment. "Do you enjoy reading, Your Highness?" she asked, finding her voice despite her racing heart. His gaze snapped to hers, surprise flickering in those icy depths. Whether at her boldness or the question itself, she could not tell. After a pause, he inclined his head. "I do," It is one of the few pleasures that has never disappointed. The words lingered with her, heavy with meaning. Who, or what, had disappointed him so bitterly? The meal ended with stilted farewells as Lord and Lady Aldwyn prepared to depart, leaving their daughter to her new life within the forbidding walls of Durnmere. Lady Isolde Aldwyn embraced her daughter with uncharacteristic fervor, her perfume mingling with the salt of restrained tears. "Write to us," she whispered urgently. "Often." Lord Reginald Aldwyn shook the prince's hand, his smile stretched too tight, his voice too hearty to be genuine. "Take good care of her, Durnmere." "She is my princess," Prince Alaric Draemont replied with quiet gravity. "She will want for nothing." Again, Seraphina noted the absence. He spoke of material security, not affection, never happiness. As her parents' carriage dwindled down the long, gravel drive, carrying with it the last tangible thread to her former life, a hollowness settled upon her. She stood on the broad stone steps of Durnmere Keep, the vast fortress that was now her home, beside a husband who remained as impenetrable as when she first heard his name whispered in society halls. "You must be weary from the day's ceremonies," Alaric said formally, his voice echoing between them like a chasm. "Mrs. Winters will escort you to your chambers. I have matters requiring my attention in the study." Disappointment mingled curiously with relief in Seraphina's chest. "Of course, Your Grace." "Alaric," he interrupted, a fleeting flicker of something indefinable crossing his severe features. "You are my wife now. At least in private, you should use my name." She repeated it softly, tasting it on her lips. "Alaric." He inclined his head in acknowledgement, though the moment of intimacy lasted scarcely a breath. "The south wing is under renovation. Best you keep from wandering there, for your own safety." With that cryptic warning, words that might have belonged to one of the Gothic tales she once read for amusement, but which now struck with ominous weight, he strode away, his footfalls echoing on marble until they vanished into silence. Her chambers lay in the west wing, a suite adorned in pale blues and creams, colors meant to soothe, but which felt distant and impersonal. Everything was new, carefully chosen and lavishly appointed, yet nothing bore the mark of her own hand or history. "The prince had these rooms refurbished entirely for your arrival," Mrs. Eleanor Winters informed her, a hint of approval softening her otherwise impassive face. "The previous princess's chambers have not been touched for many years." "The previous princess?" Seraphina asked quickly, grasping at this rare chance to learn something of the family she had married into. "The prince's mother passed when he was but a boy," Mrs. Winters replied with measured finality, her tone making it clear no further questions would be welcome. Left alone, Seraphina wandered through her new domain, a sitting room that looked out upon formal gardens now shrouded in twilight mist, a dressing chamber brimming with gowns she had never seen before, a bathing room with modern plumbing that might have delighted her in another life. The bedchamber was dominated by a towering four-poster draped in blue velvet, its vastness both regal and foreboding. She approached it with hesitant steps, her mind crowded with the expectations of the wedding night. The thought sent waves of dread, and to her shame, a flicker of confusing warmth, coursing through her body. Hours slipped by. Clarice Bennet arrived with the remainder of her luggage, her presence a balm of familiarity in the alien surroundings. She helped Seraphina out of her bridal gown and into a nightdress of cream silk, another garment that had appeared unasked in her wardrobe. She brushed out her mistress's copper hair until it gleamed under candlelight. "Has there been word?" Seraphina asked at last, half dreading, half anticipating his arrival. Clarice shook her head gently. "The prince is still in his study, my lady, your highness." The night deepened. Dinner was delivered on a tray to her sitting room, delicacies arranged with precision, yet eaten in silence, untouched by her anxious stomach. By the time the clock neared midnight, Seraphina had resigned herself to solitude. Then a knock at the door. Her heart leapt painfully. "Enter," she whispered. The door opened. There he stood, Prince Alaric, still clad in his wedding attire, the ivory of his cravat loosened only slightly. He lingered at the threshold, tall, broad, the firelight painting his features into unreadable shadow. "Forgive the lateness of the hour," he said, his tone formal. "I wished to be certain you were comfortably settled." "Yes, thank you," Seraphina replied, clutching her dressing gown more tightly around her. "The rooms are lovely." Silence thickened between them. She waited, her pulse a drum, for him to cross the chamber, to claim the rights of husband. But he did not move. He remained by the door, posture rigid, eyes guarded. "Is there anything you require?" he asked at last. The question startled her more than a demand would have. It was so wholly at odds with the fearsome image society had painted that she could only stare. He followed her gaze, the defensive way she stood, the bed between them, and comprehension flickered in his eyes. Pain, fleeting yet unmistakable, passed across his face. "Are you afraid of me?" His voice was quiet, almost tentative. Seraphina opened her mouth to deny it. A proper wife would surely deny such a thing. But the truth spilled free before she could catch it. "Yes," she whispered. For a heartbeat, his expression hardened. Then it settled into studied neutrality. He nodded once, as though confirming what he had long suspected. "I see." He turned toward the door. "Then I shall bid you good night." His hand closed upon the knob, his back still to her. "You need not fear that obligation of marriage. I will not come to you unless you invite me." And then he was gone, the door shutting with soft finality. Seraphina sank onto the edge of the massive bed, her thoughts a storm. All the rumors, all the dire expectations had prepared her for a night of dominance, of fear fulfilled. Instead, the man branded as a monster had left her with something unthinkable: choice. What sort of monster offers mercy? The days unfolded with unnerving quiet. Seraphina fell into a routine within the labyrinthine keep. Meals with the prince were taken in solemn formality at the long dining table, their conversation as spare as the candlelight. He was always polite, always distant, never cruel, yet never close. During her solitary explorations, careful to avoid the forbidden south wing, she discovered the library, a cavernous chamber of 2 stories, its shelves climbing toward vaulted ceilings, ladders perched upon rails to grant access to volumes high above. Here she found solace, retreating into the world of words. It was there, 1 week after the wedding, that she encountered Alaric unexpectedly. He was seated by the hearth, a leather-bound volume open in his hands, so absorbed he did not notice her entrance. In that unguarded moment, his stern features were softened by the fire's glow, his posture relaxed. For an instant, she glimpsed not the cold figure of rumor, but the man he might have been had fate not shaped him otherwise. When he lifted his head and saw her, surprise flickered across his eyes before the mask returned. "Forgive me. I did not hear you enter." "No, I should apologize for disturbing you," Seraphina replied quickly, retreating a step. "I will come back later. Please stay." The word seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. He gestured toward the shelves. "This library is yours to use as you please." I was about to leave. He began to rise, but she spoke without forethought. "What are you reading?" He hesitated, then lifted the book. A collection of poetry by John Keats. "An indulgence," he admitted, as if confessing a weakness. "Beauty is truth, truth beauty," Seraphina quoted softly, recognizing the poet's hand. His eyes widened slightly, surprised. "My father's library was not so grand as this," she continued, her voice steadier now. "But it was well stocked. Poetry has always been a comfort to me." A silence stretched, delicate yet charged. In that breath, something genuine passed between them, fragile but real. At length, Alaric cleared his throat and rose. "I shall leave you to your reading." As he passed her, he paused. "Seraphina," he said, her name still strange upon his lips. "Durnmere Keep is your home now. You need not confine yourself to your chambers. The house and grounds are yours to explore." His mouth tightened slightly. "Except the south wing." "Yes," she replied quietly. "I remember." He studied her for a moment longer, as though seeking something in her face. Whatever it was, he did not find it. With a curt bow, he departed. Seraphina drifted toward the chair he had left, still warm from his presence. On the table beside it lay not only the Keats volume, but also a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with the tidy columns of estate accounts. Beside the ledger lay a list of tenants' names, each accompanied by careful notes: repairs required to cottages, farming tools in need of replacement, accounts of livestock and grain. The neat columns revealed a truth society's gossip had never granted him: that Prince Alaric Draemont took his duties as landlord with seriousness, that he paid heed to the needs of those who lived under his charge. It was a small discovery, yet one that unsettled the portrait of the cold, impenetrable figure whispered about in drawing rooms. It suggested not a monster, but a man bound, perhaps even burdened, by responsibility. As Seraphina settled into the chair with a book of her own, her thoughts circled him. What other truths might lie hidden beneath his forbidding exterior? And though she resisted admitting it, a faint spark of curiosity, perhaps even the first fragile stirrings of interest, awoke in her. That night, sleep proved elusive. She stared upward at the heavy canopy of her bed, listening to the storm press against the window panes, and wondered what shadows haunted Durnmere Keep. What secrets stood guard behind her husband's measured silences? What scars lingered beneath the mask of control? He had met her fear not with domination, but with choice. That singular mercy whispered of a man who was not the monster she had been led to expect. Days stretched into weeks. Seraphina began to settle into a rhythm, one unlike anything she had envisioned as a bride. Alaric remained a distant figure, absorbed from dawn until dusk in estate matters that consumed his time. They shared meals on occasion, taken in formal silence at the long table beneath the painted ceiling, but he sought her company no further. True to the promise made on their wedding night, he never pressed himself upon her. He treated her with courtesy, even deference, but always from behind the invisible wall he carried with him. And yet, she found her gaze drifting toward him when he was unaware. The furrow of his brow as he bent over correspondence, the surprising gentleness of his hands when he handled volumes from his library, the rare flicker of vulnerability when his guard slipped. These glimpses, so fleeting yet undeniable, only deepened her curiosity about the man behind the title. The keep itself was a place of contradictions. The library, the music room, the gardens, these were kept in immaculate order, every surface polished, every bloom attended. Yet other sections seemed abandoned to decay, none more so than the forbidden south wing, its doors firmly barred, its corridors hushed. Even the staff mirrored the house, efficient and impeccable in their duties, yet curiously reserved, as though united in some silent pact of secrecy. Only Mrs. Eleanor Winters occasionally revealed slivers of the household's inner workings, though her loyalty to the prince ensured that nothing of real substance ever slipped past her lips. It was during one of her wanderings that Seraphina made her first true discovery. In a seldom-used drawing room of the north wing, half concealed by heavy draperies, she uncovered a portrait. Dust filmed its frame, but the painting beneath spoke vividly. The composition showed a family group, a stern, imperious couple seated, their young son, no more than 16 or 17, standing beside them. She recognized the youth immediately, Alaric, his resemblance too striking to mistake. Yet it was the fourth figure that stole her breath. A boy of perhaps 10, with raven hair like his brother's but features softened by laughter, his smile open and unburdened in a way she had never seen upon Alaric's face. That would be Master Frederick, the young master. The voice startled her. She turned to find Simeon, the elderly butler, standing in the doorway. "I did not know the prince had a brother," she said quickly, turning back to the painting. "Had, your highness," Simeon corrected quietly. "Master Frederick passed many years ago." "How?" The question escaped before she could temper her curiosity. But Simeon's face closed like a book snapped shut. "It is not my place to speak of such matters. If you'll pardon me, I have duties to attend." With a bow, he was gone before she could press him further. Seraphina lingered before the portrait, her thoughts heavy. A brother lost. The revelation explained something of the shadows that haunted the halls of Durnmere, yet it conjured new mysteries. That evening, as they dined together beneath the glittering chandeliers, Seraphina gathered her courage. "I came across a portrait today," she began carefully, watching his face. "In the north drawing room." Alaric's hand stilled upon his wine glass. "Did you? You had a brother." The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. His features hardened into the mask she had come to recognize. "Frederick died 20 years ago," he said, each word clipped. "That portrait should have been removed with the others." "The others?" she asked softly. "I prefer not to be reminded of what cannot be undone." His voice brooked no further inquiry. He rose abruptly. "If you'll excuse me, I have correspondence requiring my attention." Leaving his meal unfinished, he strode from the room, tension carved into every line of his frame. That night, sleepless and restless with frustration, Seraphina made a quiet resolution. If Alaric would not speak of his past, she would uncover it herself. Perhaps in understanding him, she might bridge the gulf between them, a gulf she now longed to cross, though she scarcely admitted as much even in her own thoughts. The opportunity presented itself sooner than she expected. At breakfast the following morning, Alaric announced with his usual formality, "I must travel to London on business. I shall be away several days. Is there anything you require from town?" Seraphina shook her head. "I believe I have all I need." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment, fleeting, before he inclined his head. "Mrs. Winters will oversee the household in my absence. Should you require anything, she will attend you." By midday, his carriage had departed. Seraphina wasted no time. She began in the library, combing through shelves of family records, letters, account books, anything that might reveal the hidden history of the Draimonts. For hours she unearthed little of use. Then, at Alaric's great desk, her hand paused upon a drawer secured with a small lock. Improper though it was, curiosity burned hotter than conscience. Fetching a letter opener, she worked at the mechanism until it gave with a quiet snap. Inside lay a slim leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. Her heart thudded as she turned the first leaves, recognizing Alaric's hand, earlier, less disciplined, the script of a youth on the cusp of manhood. She hesitated, conscience warring with desire. To read his private thoughts was a trespass. Yet how else was she to know the man behind the mask? At last she yielded, telling herself she would seek only what pertained to Frederick. The early entries spoke of studies, of hunting excursions, of dinners and social calls, ordinary preoccupations of a young aristocrat. Frederick appeared often, always with warmth, described with the fondness of an elder brother who both teased and adored. The Draemont parents emerged in the background, distant, exacting, particularly their father, the late prince, whose sternness Alaric chronicled with unease. Then her breath caught upon a single entry, dated April 15, 1827. Father insists I accompany him to survey the new section of the mine. Frederick begged to come along. April 14, 1827. Frederick has been enchanted by the workings of the mines since Father first showed us the engineer's plans. Mother has pressed Father to allow him to join us, though he was reluctant. Frederick has a way of charming even the most unyielding heart. Tomorrow, at first light, we depart together. The next entry came nearly a week later. The script was jagged, ink-blotched as though marred by falling tears. April 21, 1827. They say there was nothing I could have done, that no one could have reached him before the tunnel collapsed in on itself. The physician claims I would have perished as well had I forced my way inside. Cold comfort, as I hear Mother's sobs through the walls. Father speaks to no one. He locks himself in his study with brandy for solace. Frederick is gone. My brother is gone. And with him, every light in this cursed house. Seraphina's tears blurred the words. The grief on those pages was raw, unbearable in its honesty. Several leaves had been violently torn from the journal, as if even the act of preserving those memories had been too painful. When the entries resumed months later, the tone was altered, harder, restrained, more like the man she had come to know. November 3, 1827. Father's drinking worsens. The mine stands silent, though its closure leaves our people without livelihood. When I suggested reopening with safety measures, Father flew into a rage I scarcely recognized. That place has taken enough from us, he roared. Perhaps he is right. Yet I cannot help but think Frederick would wish us to draw some good from his loss. Mother wanders her rooms like a ghost, dulled by laudanum the physician prescribes. She looks through me when I speak, as though hoping to see Frederick instead. Page upon page chronicled the slow unraveling of the Draemont family. The father sinking into drink and bitterness, the mother slipping into a haze of opiates, the weight of stewardship falling squarely upon a youth not yet 20. The final entry came after a silence of years. June 17, 1830. Father is dead, found this morning in his study with an empty decanter at his side. They claim his heart failed, but I know grief claimed him long ago. Mother did not stir at the news. She scarcely comprehends the world any longer. At 19, I am Prince of Durnmere, master of a declining estate and a family in ruins. At Frederick's grave I vowed I would restore what was lost, that his death would not be meaningless. From this day forward, I must be prince in all things. Sentiment is a luxury I cannot afford. Seraphina closed the journal with trembling hands, her heart heavy. She understood, at last, why Alaric wore his grief like armor. His solitude, his reserve, even the shuttered south wing, it all bore the weight of that tragedy. Yet one mystery remained. Why, after so many years, had he chosen her as his princess? Replacing the journal with care, her gaze lifted to a small watercolor tucked upon a high shelf. A young woman gazed out from the painting, her copper hair shining, her eyes soft with kindness. Seraphina started at the resemblance. It was not exact, yet it was enough to chill her. Her name was Charlotte Blackwood. Seraphina whirled. Mrs. Winters stood at the threshold, her expression as unreadable as ever. I wasn't, Seraphina stammered, guilt flooding her cheeks. The housekeeper stepped into the chamber, her eyes lingering on the painting. You resemble her. When I first saw your portrait, I suspected that was why His Highness chose you. My portrait? The sketch from Lady Catherford's masquerade, 2 seasons ago. An artist captured your likeness at his request. The prince saw it, and the resemblance struck him deeply. Seraphina's knees weakened. And who was she to him? Mrs. Winters hesitated. Then, with measured gravity, they were betrothed. She was awaiting their return from the mine that fateful day. When news came of the collapse, she rushed to the site. Her horse was startled amidst the commotion. She was thrown, her neck broken instantly. Seraphina felt horror crawl over her. So he lost not only his brother, but his intended, and soon after, his parents as well. Mrs. Winters inclined her head. He was scarcely more than a boy, left to bear the weight of a principality and the heaviest grief imaginable. That is why he never married, Seraphina whispered. Until now. Until me. A dreadful thought seized her. Am I merely a ghost made flesh? A replacement? For the first time, something softened in Mrs. Winters's stern countenance. Your Highness, I have served Durnmere Keep for 40 years. I watched the prince grow from a spirited boy to the man he is now. I tell you this, I have never seen him look at anyone the way he sometimes looks at you, when he believes himself unobserved. Seraphina's heart beat faster. What do you mean? The prince chose you because you reminded him of someone he lost, yes. But in these weeks, I believe he has begun to see you, not a shadow of the past, but yourself. Straightening, Mrs. Winters smoothed her skirts, retreating into professional composure. It is not my place to say more. I simply thought you should know something of the man you have married. 3 days later, when Alaric returned from London, Seraphina beheld him anew. She saw the weariness in his eyes, the burdens he carried in silence, the fleeting moments when his gaze seemed lost to memories of what once was. At dinner, she dared what she had not before, true conversation. How was London? She asked gently. Surprise flickered in his eyes at her sincerity. Productive, if tedious. The solicitors required signatures on documents regarding the eastern estates. The mining estates? She asked carefully. His gaze sharpened. You have been inquiring during my absence. I have been trying to understand Durnmere, she replied evenly. And its master. A silence stretched long between them. At last, Alaric set down his fork, every movement deliberate. And what, Seraphina, have you discovered? She drew a breath. I know of Frederick. And Charlotte Blackwood. The color drained from his face. His hands whitened as they gripped the edge of the table. For a moment she feared she had gone too far, that her boldness would shatter the fragile peace between them. Who told you of Charlotte? His voice was quiet, dangerously so. Mrs. Winters. I found the painting in the library. Alaric closed his eyes, and when he opened them, pain glimmered there, raw and unguarded. So now you see the truth. Why the Prince of Durnmere is whispered of as cursed, the man whose brother and betrothed perished in a single day, whose family crumbled into ruin. The cold specter who emerged from tragedy, heartless and feared. That is not what I see, Seraphina said softly. His gaze fixed upon her, skeptical, even wounded. No. Then what do you see? I see a man who lost everything he loved when he was scarcely more than a boy. A man who bore burdens that would have crushed most others. A man who, despite it all, endured. Surviving is not living, Alaric murmured so softly Seraphina almost doubted she had heard him. She gathered her courage, her voice steady though her heart thundered. Then perhaps it is time you began to live again. Their eyes locked across the table, and for the first time since their union, something real seemed to spark between them. The distant, guarded man softened, his expression younger, more vulnerable. For one fragile instant, the weight of years fell from him. Then a footman arrived with the next course, and the spell fractured. Alaric retreated behind his habitual formality, but not entirely. Throughout the remainder of the meal, Seraphina caught him glancing at her, his gaze touched with curiosity and something warmer. When they parted for the evening, he lingered. Would you care to join me in the library tomorrow? There is a collection of first editions you may find of interest. The tentative invitation, simple though it was, marked the first time he had reached out voluntarily. Seraphina's heart lifted. I would like that very much. Alaric inclined his head, and satisfaction flickered across his features. Good night, Seraphina. Good night, Alaric. The weeks that followed brought a gradual thaw. Each afternoon, they met in the library. Sometimes they read in companionable silence, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the whisper of turning pages. Other times, conversation flowed, deepening with each meeting as Alaric cautiously lowered his defenses. He revealed a mind steeped in philosophy and poetry, far richer than his forbidding exterior suggested. She, in turn, shared her love of music, verse, and watercolor painting. When he learned she played the pianoforte, He had the long-neglected instrument in the music room tuned for the first time in decades. Charlotte played, he said simply, when Seraphina uncovered a cache of sheet music tucked in a cabinet. I have not borne to hear those melodies since. Would you prefer I choose something else? She offered gently. He considered, then shook his head. No. Perhaps it is time those notes were heard again. If you are willing. So she played Charlotte's music, her fingers coaxing life back into the silent keys. Alaric closed his eyes as the haunting strains filled the chamber. His face was a canvas of pain and peace entwined, as though each note tore at an old wound, yet soothed it in the same breath. When the last chord faded, the silence that followed was sacred, not strained. Thank you, he said hoarsely. She would have liked you, I think. The words pierced Seraphina's heart with both sorrow and gratitude. They were acknowledgement. She was seen not as a shadow of the past, but as herself. As April crept near, Seraphina sensed the anniversary of the tragedy pressing upon him. Alaric grew restless. His hours in the study stretched deep into night, and more than once she heard him cry out in his chamber. Yet when she sought him, he brushed her off with a stiff denial, a dream, nothing more. The night before the dreaded date, he did not appear at dinner. When Seraphina inquired, Mrs. Winters confessed, her composure wavering. His Highness rode out this afternoon, and has not yet returned. He always rides on this day. Usually he comes back before nightfall. Storm clouds gathered, rain lashing against the windows as hours passed. When midnight struck, Seraphina could endure no longer. Prepare lanterns, she ordered, fastening her riding cloak. Ready the horses. Oh, Your Highness, you must not, Simeon the butler protested. The weather is perilous, and the ground near the old mine is treacherous even in daylight. The old mine? Seraphina repeated, the truth dawning. That is where he would go. Butler and housekeeper exchanged uneasy glances. It is possible, Mrs. Winters admitted. He visits the site each year, though never at night. Then that is where I shall ride, Seraphina declared, pulling on her gloves. You may accompany me or not, but I will not sit idle while my husband remains lost. Her conviction brooked no argument. Moments later, mounted on a sturdy mare, she led the small party through the storm. Mrs. Winters gave directions, while two reluctant grooms followed, faces pale with dread of approaching the mine on this of all nights. The journey was harrowing. Rain sheeted down, turning paths into rivers of mud. Lightning split the sky, revealing the moor in violent flashes, thunder rolling close behind. The horses skittered at every crack and blaze, their riders clinging tight. They found his steed first, tethered beneath a rocky overhang, reins fastened loosely, as though abandoned in haste. But of Alaric there was no trace. The mine entrance lies just ahead, one groom shouted above the storm. But no one has gone within for years. It is perilous. Stay here with the horses, Seraphina commanded, dismounting. If we are not returned within half an hour, ride back for aid. Lantern raised high, she pressed forward. The mouth of the mine yawned in the hillside, half collapsed, overgrown with brambles. The ground bore fresh prints, his prints. Alaric, she called, her voice swallowed by the storm. Alaric, are you there? For a dreadful moment, only wind and rain answered. Then, faint from the depths, Seraphina. Her heart leapt. She pushed through the narrow opening, squeezing between sagging beams. The air inside was damp, rank with earth and decay. Her lantern threw long, wavering shadows across dripping walls. Here, came his voice, closer now, around a bend. She found him seated on a fallen timber, head in his hands, soaked through, oblivious to the cold. He looked up as the light touched him, disbelief and shame etched upon his face. What are you doing here? He demanded, staggering to his feet. It isn't safe. I could say the same to you, she countered, relief sharpening her tone. The household was frantic. We thought, her words caught. We thought we'd lost you. He raked a hand through his wet hair, suddenly unmoored, his composure fractured. I lost track of time. I often do here. She approached cautiously, as though to a wounded animal. Alaric, come back. Whatever ghosts you face, you need not face them alone. Not anymore. His eyes lifted to hers, lantern light revealing streaks down his cheeks. Rain or tears, she could not tell. You do not understand. This is where it happened. Where I failed him. Failed who? Frederick. His gaze drifted to the collapsed tunnel behind him. He was just ahead when the beams gave way. I heard him call once, just once, before the earth swallowed him. I tried to reach him, but father pulled me back. Said we would lose both sons. He was right, of course. But in my dreams, I still hear Frederick calling. Seraphina drew nearer. It was not your fault. You were only a boy. There was nothing you could have done. I was his elder. I was meant to protect him. And your father was meant to ensure the mine was safe, she countered gently. That burden was not yours to bear alone. His eyes met hers, naked with anguish. When Charlotte fell, I thought God was punishing me, taking everything I loved because I failed my brother. No, Seraphina said firmly, reaching for his cold hand. It was tragedy, cruel, merciless tragedy. But not punishment. Not your fault. Something broke in him then. His shoulders slumped, and he leaned forward until his forehead touched hers. I have carried this guilt for 20 years, he whispered. I do not know how to set it down. Not all at once, she murmured, but a little each day, and not alone. A deep rumble shook the tunnel. Alaric straightened, instincts surging. We must leave. Now. He pulled her hand in his, urgency overriding grief. They hurried toward the entrance, stones rattling underfoot. Then, an ominous crack. Run! Alaric cried, thrusting her ahead as dust and splinters rained from above. They burst into the storm-slashed night, just as the mouth of the mine gave its final sigh, collapsing in a roar of stone and timber. The grooms rushed forward, dragging them clear as the ground shuddered. When at last the earth stilled, Seraphina realized she still clutched Alaric's hand. Both were soaked, mud-stained, breathless, but alive. Alaric stood staring at the collapsed mine, his face pale with shock. The rain streaked down his cheeks, mingling with disbelief. It's gone, he rasped. After all these years, it's gone. Seraphina squeezed his hand gently. Perhaps it is time, she whispered. Time to let the past rest. He turned to her then, his storm-blue eyes searching her face as though truly seeing her for the first time. You came for me, he said, wonder in his voice. Into the dark, into danger. Of course I did, she replied simply. You're my husband. Something in him shifted, the last barricades crumbling. With a tenderness she had never imagined from him, Alaric lifted a hand and cupped her cheek. Seraphina Draemont, he murmured, her new name reverent upon his lips. What have I done to deserve you? Before she could answer, his mouth found hers, not the cold, ceremonial kiss of their wedding day, but one born of gratitude, awakening tenderness, and the fragile beginnings of love. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers, their breath mingling in the storm-lashed air. Let's go home, he whispered. And as they rode back toward Durnmere Keep, the tempest easing around them, Seraphina realized that, for the first time since her arrival, she truly was going home, not to a haunted fortress, but to a place where healing had begun. Beside her rode not the feared Prince of Whispers, but Alaric, a man wounded, yes, but capable of kindness and perhaps of love. Spring ripened into summer, bringing change to the keep as profound as to its master. The castle itself seemed to breathe more easily, as though the collapse of the mine had released old phantoms. Alaric ordered the long-shuttered south wing renewed, once a corridor of grief, now filled with windows, fresh plaster, and light. But the greatest transformation was within Alaric himself. To his tenants and associates, he remained formidable, the Prince of Durnmere who commanded respect. Yet in private with Seraphina, another man emerged. He smiled often now, his laughter, rusted with disuse, returning to life in her presence. Evenings were theirs by choice, not obligation. Sometimes they read aloud in the library. Sometimes she played the pianoforte while he listened, eyes closed, as if the notes stitched together pieces of his soul. Other nights they simply talked, about books, the estate, their childhood dreams. Slowly, he drew her into the work of Durnmere, sharing accounts and ledgers, listening to her insight with genuine respect. You have a keen head for figures, he remarked one afternoon as they studied the quarterly accounts. Better than mine, truth be told. My father never taught me such things, Seraphina admitted, pleased by his praise. He assumed I would marry someone to manage them for me. Alaric's mouth curved into a wry half-smile. And instead, you married me, who insists on boring you with ledgers and crop rotations. I find it fascinating, not dull, she corrected. This is our home, our responsibility. I want to understand it. The word "our" lingered between them, weighted with new meaning. Alaric reached across the desk, covering her hand with his. I never thought to share these burdens. I was accustomed to carrying them alone. You don't have to anymore, Seraphina promised softly. That night, for the first time, Alaric did not merely wish her good night, he came to stay. Their union was tender, hesitant at first, then deepened into passion as trust blossomed between them. Later, lying within the circle of his arms, Seraphina marveled at how far they had journeyed from their fearful beginnings. What are you thinking? Alaric murmured against her hair. I was remembering our wedding night, she confessed, smiling faintly in the dark. He stilled. When you told me you were afraid? His arms tightened. I saw such terror in your eyes that night. It wounded me, though I had given you every reason. Not you, Seraphina corrected gently. Your reputation, the rumors. But the man who asked me honestly if I feared him, the man who gave me choice when he could have demanded his rights. She hesitated, then whispered, I think I began to love him in that moment, though I did not recognize it then. Alaric froze, the word love sounding foreign upon his tongue. Love, he echoed, as though afraid it might vanish if spoken too loudly. Her heart raced, but she pressed on. Yes, I love you, Alaric. Not because you remind me of anyone else, not because you are Prince of Durnmere, but because you are you, stubborn, honorable, and kind beneath all your armor. He shifted, propping himself above her so moonlight bathed his features. His expression was one of wonder, disbelief. I never thought to hear those words again, he whispered. Never thought to feel worthy of them. You are, Seraphina said with conviction, reaching to cup his cheek. So worthy. Alaric pressed a trembling kiss into her palm. When I first saw you at that Edinburgh ball 2 seasons ago, something in you caught me. Yes, your likeness to Charlotte first drew my eye. I won't deny it. But it was your spirit that held me. The way you laughed with true joy, the kindness you showed a forgotten elder while others sought only glittering company. The gentleness with which you declined suitors, then the grace with which you accepted a shy young man others ignored. And the intelligence in your eyes when you spoke of poetry, while the rest prattled of ribbons. Seraphina's breath caught. You noticed all that? I noticed everything, he said simply. And for the first time in nearly 20 years, I dreamed of a future not built on duty alone. It terrified me. So you arranged our marriage without truly meeting me, she prompted, her voice curious rather than reproachful. He gave a rueful smile. I told myself a formal arrangement would shield us both. In truth, I was a coward, afraid you would reject me if you knew the broken man behind the title. Not broken, she whispered, kissing him softly. Wounded and healing. Because of you, he murmured, his lips brushing hers again. My brave, beautiful princess, who faced not only her fears but mine. He drew back slightly, his gaze burning. I love you, Seraphina. I should have said it long ago. The words felt a presumption, as though I had no right. But I cannot keep them now. Say them again, she whispered, joy unfurling within her. I love you, Alaric said, his voice firm, reverent. With all I am, all I have been, and all I may yet become, with you beside me. And as they sealed the vow with a kiss, it was not only passion but promise, of a future neither had dared to hope for on that mist-shrouded morning when they first met at the altar. A future had begun to take shape, one built not upon fear or obligation, but on understanding, respect, and love freely given. Autumn unfurled across Durnmere, clothing the estate in rich golds and russets. The harvest was plentiful, the tenants prospering under Alaric's increasingly fair and forward-thinking governance. At Seraphina's suggestion, a small school was established for the tenants' children, and a weekly clinic was arranged with a visiting physician. These improvements were embraced with gratitude, strengthening the bond between the keep's master and his people. The keep itself transformed. Long-shuttered chambers opened to light once more, and the grounds, once manicured with obsessive severity, were tended now with care and liveliness. Laughter echoed through stone corridors that had known only hushed grief for decades. Even the staff thawed toward their mistress. Mrs. Winters's stern mouth occasionally softened into smiles, and old Simmons sometimes recounted mischievous tales of Alaric's boyhood pranks when his master was absent. It was on a crisp October morning that the final piece of healing fell quietly into place. For several days, Seraphina had felt unwell, nothing severe, only weariness and an aversion to certain scents. When she mentioned it, Mrs. Winters's knowing look filled her with a trembling hope. The visiting physician confirmed it. Seraphina carried a child, Alaric's child, expected in the early spring. She waited until evening to share the news, when they had dined and retired to the library. Alaric sat by the fire, reading letters, while she sat near him, embroidery forgotten in her lap. Alaric, she began, setting aside her work. I saw Dr. Murren today. His head lifted at once, concern flashing across his features. Are you unwell? You have seemed tired of late. Not unwell, she answered, a smile trembling on her lips. Quite the opposite. He confirmed, we are to have a child. The letter slipped unheeded from Alaric's fingers. For a moment he stared, as if translating words from a foreign tongue. A child, he repeated, hoarse with disbelief. Seraphina nodded, heart fluttering with both joy and uncertainty. Are you pleased? Alaric crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling before her with unguarded intensity. Pleased, he echoed, his voice breaking. Seraphina, you have given me back my life, my heart, my very ability to look forward instead of back. And now, you give me this greatest gift. His hands framed her face, his touch trembling with reverence. Yes, I am pleased. I am humbled. I am terrified. I am everything at once. Tears stung her eyes. I worried you might fear, history repeating. Understanding flickered in his gaze. You thought I might dread another loss. She nodded. Alaric's expression grew solemn, his hand pressing tenderly against her still flat belly. My love, the shadows of the past shaped me, but they shall not govern our child. This little one will be born into a home of warmth, not cold duty. They will know a father who errs but strives, who values kindness above power, truth above pretense, and who loves their mother with every part of his being. And they will know their mother, Seraphina whispered, tears falling freely, as a woman who never ceased to hope, who believed in second chances, who saw through the armor to the man beneath. He drew her into his arms, holding her as if binding the promise to eternity. We will build this future together, he vowed. Day by day, choice by choice. The winter months passed in tranquil anticipation. Alaric proved devoted, sometimes excessively protective. He moved their chambers to the ground floor so she need not climb the stairs, commissioned a padded carriage for her rare outings, and even learned to brew her favored tea when morning sickness plagued her. Their evenings remained sacred, often filled with plans for the nursery or the child's future. To Seraphina's astonishment, Alaric revealed a hidden gift for woodworking. My grandfather taught me, he said when she marveled at the cradle he shaped with his own hands, its polished wood smooth beneath her touch. He believed a prince should know craft as well as command. The once forbidden south wing, dark with memories, was remade into a nursery suite. Walls once shadowed by grief now gleamed in soft hues, windows long shuttered now welcomed the light. Standing together in the renewed space, Alaric murmured, It feels right, to bring new life here, to reclaim it. Frederick would approve, Seraphina said softly. Yes, Alaric agreed. And Charlotte, too. For the first time, her name passed his lips without pain, a step toward wholeness. Late winter brought unexpected tidings from London. Alaric's distant cousin, Lord Richard Caldwell, had died suddenly, leaving behind his only daughter, Eleanor, scarcely 6 years old. By the terms of the will, Alaric was named her guardian. She has lost both parents now, he told Seraphina, troubled. I have never even met her. Then she must come here, Seraphina replied without hesitation. No child should face such grief alone. 2 weeks later, a small figure arrived at Durnmere's gates, a solemn girl clutching a worn doll, her wide brown eyes watchful. Seraphina's heart ached at once, recognizing the same wary defenses she had seen in Alaric. But it was Alaric himself who reached her first. He knelt, dignified though he was, until their eyes were level. I know what it is to lose those you love, he told her simply. Durnmere was a cold place when I was young. It is not so now. While we cannot replace your father, we would offer you a home, if you will have us. Eleanor studied him with grave seriousness. Then, with childlike bluntness, she asked, May I have a pony? For the first time in years, Alaric's laugh rang freely through the hall, warm, unrestrained, and entirely genuine. Yes, he said, smiling through his astonishment. Yes, I think that can be arranged. Her arrival brought unexpected joy in the last weeks before the baby's birth. Through Eleanor's eyes, Alaric revisited childhood, not with sorrow but with wonder. And together, they forged a household where shadows no longer ruled, but light, laughter, and love. Watching Prince Alaric teach young Eleanor to ride her promised pony, hearing their laughter drift upward from the gardens, Princess Seraphina felt her heart swell with a joy she had once thought impossible. She remembered the frightened bride who had first arrived at Durnmere Keep, shadowed by rumors and trepidation. How far that young woman had come. The following spring, as wildflowers spilled across the highland meadows and birds built their nests among awakening branches, Seraphina gave birth to twins. A dark-haired boy, the image of his father, and a copper-tressed girl, her mother's likeness. Alaric, who had paced like a caged lion during the long hours of labor, was overcome when the midwife placed the infants into his arms. Frederick and Charlotte, he whispered, voice thick with emotion, offering the names with a tentative glance toward Seraphina. She smiled, weary but radiant. She understood at once, the healing in honoring those once lost, while moving into a brighter future. Frederick and Charlotte, she agreed softly. Alaric laid the swaddled babes beside their mother, then sank onto the bed's edge, clasping Seraphina's hand. When you first came to Durnmere, you asked if I feared that particular duty of marriage, he murmured, eyes shimmering. Now I must ask you, are you afraid? Seraphina gazed at him, then at their newborns, her heart nearly bursting. No, she whispered, truth ringing clear. Not of anything, as long as we face it together. Alaric bent to kiss her brow, then touched his lips gently to each child's head. Together, he vowed. Always. Years passed, and the once feared Prince of Draemont became known not for aloofness or severity, but for fairness, innovation, and his evident devotion to family. Durnmere Keep, once shrouded in whispers of grief, became a beacon of life and community. The great hall hosted festivals, the gardens opened to villagers each summer. Eleanor grew into a spirited young woman, quick-witted and determined, but gifted also with a laugh that lit every room. She adored her younger cousins and fiercely appointed herself their protector. In time, Alaric formally adopted her, not by obligation but by love, and from that day she was wholly, unequivocally family. Frederick and Charlotte thrived beneath their parents' guidance. Alaric proved nothing like the distant father he had once endured. He was present, affectionate, willing to cast aside his princely dignity to crawl upon the floor and play, or spin bedtime tales in voices, so dramatic the children dissolved into delighted giggles. On the twins' 5th birthday, the family gathered on the south lawn. Tenants and villagers joined the celebration, children running free among garlands and laughter. Seraphina watched Alaric kneel between Frederick and Charlotte, helping them feed carrots to a pony, while Eleanor looked on with exaggerated authority. His head tipped back in laughter, unrestrained and joyful. How changed he was from the stern, enigmatic man who had awaited her at the altar. How miraculous the transformation, from haunted recluse to beloved husband and father. Mrs. Winters appeared beside her, her once rigid features softened by satisfaction. "You've done well, Your Grace," she murmured, following Seraphina's gaze toward the prince and children. "We have all done well," Seraphina corrected gently. Together. That evening, after the revelry had faded and the children slept peacefully, Alaric found her gazing out over the starlit gardens. Sliding his arms around her waist, he asked, "Are you happy?" "Beyond measure," she replied, leaning back into his warmth. "And you?" "I never believed such happiness was possible," he confessed. "When you first came to Durnmere, I was but half a man, living in shadows, bound by duty and fear. You changed everything, Seraphina, with your courage, your compassion, your insistence on seeing me." "We changed each other," she corrected, fingertips tracing the softened lines of his face. "That is what love does. It does not make us different people. It makes us better versions of ourselves." He smiled, the gesture so natural now where once it had been rare. "Do you remember what I asked you on our wedding night?" "You asked if I was afraid," she answered softly. "And now I ask again." His blue eyes held hers with quiet intensity. "After all these years, all we have built together, are you afraid?" She rose on tiptoe, kissing him tenderly, pouring into the gesture every ounce of love, gratitude, and joy born of their shared journey. "Not of anything," she whispered. "Not with you beside me." Above them, their children dreamed in innocence, untroubled by the shadows that had once haunted Durnmere. Below, spring flowers bloomed where sorrow had reigned. And within each other's arms, a prince once feared for his coldness, and a woman once terrified of her fate found their answer to the question that had begun their story. "Are you afraid?" "Not anymore." Dear listener, life often places us in vast corridors of uncertainty, where the echoes of the past threaten to silence the promises of tomorrow. Perhaps you, like Seraphina, have walked through fear. Perhaps you, like Alaric, have carried grief so heavy it seemed invisible to the world. Let this story remind you, healing is never beyond reach, even after years of quiet sorrow. Love does not always arrive in youth's rush, but in the deeper stillness of time. It is born not from perfection, but from truth. Your worth is not bound to what has been lost. It shines in the courage to keep loving, to keep hoping, to keep opening your heart, even when the night feels long. As Durnmere Keep bloomed once more, so too can your soul, in every season. With reverence, warmth, and gratitude, Voices of the Vale. Thank you, beloved traveler, for walking this journey with us until the very end. If this tale touched your spirit, we invite you to share it, so that others may also remember that love, redemption, and transformation can be found, even in the most unexpected of places.